We are at the EcoCareers conference with the National Wildlife Federation, and I'd like to thank them for having me here again. Always happy to talk to career seekers about their career search. So we're going to start with introductions, and like I said, I'm going to have to bounce between this view and the other view, so I apologize for going back and forth with that. Please leave any comment. I will stop to look at those every once in a while, but we'll also have Q&A time at the end. It's a little bit, I had planned this to be a little bit interactive, so again, if it's a little awkward, I apologize. There's also a little bit of a lag between me talking and what you hear, so we'll just deal with that as we go. So a little bit about me. My name is Laura Thorne, and I am a strategy and execution consultant. I'm also a career coach in environmental and coding spaces. I'm an author, recently published 2 works for environmental career seekers. One is an action plan workbook, and the other one is a journal to keep you motivated during the difficult job search. I'm a board member of the National Association of Environmental Professionals, and also the NAEP has a podcast called EPR. It's Environmental Professionals Radio, and I'm a co-host. That comes out every Friday, and you can find it on any platform that you listen to podcasts. I have a degree in biology from the University of South Florida. I'm a certified project management professional. And when I was in my career, I did actually used to do environmental science. I was the GIS manager and expert, our habitat restoration expert, and I managed all of our grants. So that's a little bit of my background. I would like to know about you. So this is going to be the awkward part. If you could type in the chat your name, sort of your degree field, what year you are as a student, and if you have an idea of the type of career you might want to get into. I know there's been some conversations about changing careers, navigating, pivoting. That's all great. It's also okay if you have zero idea what you want to do. All you know is you want to do something good for the planet. Totally fine. I'm going to jump out of here and back to the window. So apologize for the never-ending screens to see what you're typing. Thanks, Kim, for commenting. Thanks, Jeffrey, Stephen. I'll wait just a few seconds to see if you guys catch up with me and share your name and your career search information. Thank you, Maeve. This information also will help me answer questions and sort of direct what I say to you. So it's good for me to know whether you're seniors or juniors. Sustainable consulting, fantastic. Okay, anyone else? Go ahead and typing those things. I might jump back in here later and take another look. So as I said, if you get a chance, go ahead and put in the chat what your name is, your degree field, what your student, and if you have any idea of what type of job you might like to get. So my goal today is to give you some advanced strategies, things to think about, rather than is my resume 1 page, 2 pages, what should my LinkedIn say? I want to talk more about how you should get beyond the basic things and sort of stand out above the crowd. So think about that when you think about questions. So the way I wanted to start this was to go with the whole theme for navigating difficult terrain, was to think about if you were planning to hike the Appalachian Trail. So the Appalachian Trail, you can hike for a day, you can hike for a week, you can hike for months. If you knew you were going to go through a part of that trail that had difficult terrain, how would you prepare for that? So again, I was looking for something interactive, but I'm prepared to not have any responses. So if you can, also put in the chat what kind of things, like, and especially if you have hiked, done multi-day hiking or done the parts of the Appalachian Trail, would love to know that. That's really cool. It's one of the things I would love to do. But just think about what would you do if you were going on a multi-day hike? And again, I have to pop back here into the other screen. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing, everyone, your information. Let me catch up on that for a second too, while you're writing how you would prepare for a multi-day hike with difficult terrain. Thanks, Madeline. Tara. Perfect. Abigail, Kat, thank you so much. Green infrastructure, that's good. Fantastic. Thanks, Elizabeth. Wonderful. Zero waste. It's getting more and more popular. Good, good, good. Love to combine science and policy. Fantastic, Shireen. Okay, now we're on to the what would you do if you're preparing for a difficult hike? David, fantastic. Ask people who've done it before. Train, yep. Train, yes. Jenny says, oh, this is her background. Thank you. Food agriculture, like it. Correct gear, yep. Food. Always make sure you have enough food for that type of hike. Right, awesome. Thanks, everyone. So again, there's a lag. I apologize if I skip over any of your responses. I'm going to go back to the presentation. So some of you mentioned some of these that I have here, and you also mentioned ones I had not talked about. But you would bring a map, right? Probably one of the first things you might do is make sure you bring a map with you. Pack extra food, some of you mentioned. You might bring special tools. So if you knew that you were going to have to do some bouldering, you might bring something that you would not bring for a day hike. You might bring like a walking stick, which you wouldn't normally bring. And you would also be letting people know where you're going and when you plan to arrive. You might plan some reload or check-in stations. You'd probably go through a checklist before you left. And then you would also do some of that mental prep. And like you said, you would be training for something like this for a while. Now tell me what you would do if you got lost while you were on this trip. And I just apologize for having to go back and forth here. I map out the route. Yes, thanks, Megan. Okay, now if you got lost, what would you do? Lost on your hiking trail. David, I'm really glad you warned me about this lag. I would have been like, what is happening? Keep walking. Okay, yep. Anybody else? What do you do when you get lost? Call your wife. Okay, what if you don't have signal? Avoid panicking, yes. Communicate with someone. Mm-hmm. Panic, then figure it out. Call for help if you can. That's wonderful. I have been lost before, but fortunately was never anything that ended up being too bad. And yeah, you do sort of have a mild panic there for a little bit. But let's see. Previously learned what direction water sources are and follow them eventually. Love that, Abigail. So if you know you're going on a difficult terrain hike, you should know some exit strategies. Get oriented. Yep. Analyze your resources. Thank you. Again, I'm going to jump back to the presentation, but thank you all for submitting your responses. So yeah, when you get lost, to get unlost, you go to your North Star. As Abigail pointed out, you go back to the points that you know that are there with resources. You might go back the way you came. You might go back to your map. Hopefully, you haven't lost it. And maybe you had a plan B. So you set out on this trail, and you know that there's a place because you've talked to someone who've done this trail before, as David mentioned. You know that it's possible that there's a river that's too high to cross, or maybe there's a place where there's avalanches, and you know that there's an area where you might have to turn around and go somewhere else or take a different path. So you may have, hopefully, also had a plan B if you got somewhere. And so you might be able to say, okay, well, I don't know where I am, but you're also going to look for trail markers. And, you know, I think you can tell where I'm going with this. It's the same parallels when we were talking about what would you do to prepare for a difficult career search and journey. So to parallel this, what kind of things would you consider to be the difficult terrain of your career search? So on an actual hike, difficult terrain is, boulders, high waters, mud, maybe bear traffic areas. What are the kind of things that you would have to, that in your career search are the types of things that are difficult to navigate? And again, apologize as I jump back here. Right, from the previous one, finding a landmark. That's a good one, Stephen. It's easy. I don't know what a super senior is, but that's fantastic. Historical ecology, that's cool. Backtracking, yep. That's probably what I would do if I was lost. Job interviews, networking, yep. Those are all parts of navigating difficult career search terrain. What else do you got? I will wait because I know that you are putting things in and there's a lag here. Ooh, Megan, she put everything. Interviews, first impressions, getting a foot in the door. I think she's seen my presentation already. Cover letters, the first week of training, yep. Knowing where to begin. That's a good one, Kim. Not hearing back. That's a good one too, Miranda. Okay, I'm going to jump back over to the presentation, and you're all right on track with that. Oops, sorry. So things that are difficult in your career search, including all of what you mentioned, some of them are here too. Where to search, what to search for. One of you said getting a foot in the door, networking, how to talk about yourself, how to stand out, interviewing, and upskilling, which is part of the title of this full presentation. So all of these things are things that could get in your way and stop you from getting where you want to go. So if we keep using the metaphor of the hike, these are things where I want this job. I don't maybe know where my hike is even headed to, but these are the things that can get in the way of you getting there. So similar to going for a hike, how would you prepare for this difficult terrain of the career search? So think about the things that we mentioned, having a map, bringing the right tools, like training, what kind of things, if you were planning for, you're about to graduate, the career search is going to be difficult because you've talked to other people and you're here listening to it and hearing it over and over again. Now, how do you, thinking of it that way, what do you do to prepare? Cece, thank you. Yep. Skills, interests, previous. Yeah, the combination of knowledge, skills, and interest, I call that that's pretty much the trifecta of your passion. So when people tell you as a young person, you need to find your passion, I don't agree with that, because a lot of us don't find our passion until we've experienced life. So some people don't start a nonprofit until they lose a child to cancer. Some people don't, find their calling until often tragedy strikes, but sometimes it might be they went to visit another country and they saw something that was inspiring to them, and then they bring it back to the United States. So I find it overwhelming and a little bit over higher expectations than is necessary to tell young people that they should find their passion and start heading for it, because you don't know what that is until you start exploring. So at this point, just trying to figure out where your skills, knowledge, and interests intersect is good enough. That's your pre-passion. Okay, so things you need for your career search: going to conferences. Yep. So that would be what David said, learning from other people before you, practicing. So that's like the training part of going for a hike, practicing interviewing. Yep. Yes, David, sense of humor and humility. So we will talk about that too. You've got to have the right mindset. You can't set out up on a hike and start crying when you can't get halfway through it, or maybe you're still going to, because I have done that before, but you need to keep reminding yourself that you purposefully chose a difficult hike. So all of you, if you getting a degree and saying, I want to get into a competitive field, like something in the environment, they're all competitive. You have to keep reminding yourself that it's a competitive field, but it's going to be worth it. So I'm going to jump back to the presentation. So similar to preparing for the hike, you're going to bring a map. So I really recommend everyone who's still, while you're still a student, before you've graduated and then you're in panic mode because you feel lost, you're going to bring a map with you. You need to have something that says, here's my strategy and my plan for how I'm going to get from graduate to my first job. Instead of bringing more food, you might think about saving your money. Have a buffer. Have one of the reasons why people get desperate in their job search is because they start to run out of money and they feel like they can't take free internships, they can't do volunteering because they need to make money. And so if you have the ability to save little bits here and now, just be cautious of that saving your money could actually help you have a better job search. Keep building your skills. So some of you mentioned that's the training part. Get what I call an accountability buddy. So that is a personal friend, family member, another student who you can sit down and once a week talk about what your career goals are. Take that map with you and you guys can talk about how far you've come, what you're trying to work on, what parts of the difficult terrain you're having trouble with. Talk through how could you go to a networking event, or if you do go, like tell the other person, I have this networking event coming up, what should I do? You don't always have to go to a mentor or someone who's senior above you. You can also have an accountability buddy. Have check-ins, and that means taking your plan and checking every once a month, once a week, and saying, okay, this is the progress that I've made. Use a checklist. You can find a job search checklist on my website. Use a checklist that you can make sure that you're not skipping anything or leaving parts out. So it's just the same way you would have a checklist for going on a hike. Use the checklist so you're not like, oh shoot, I forgot to bring the compass. So you want to make sure you've covered all your bases in the job search as well. So one example is a lot of people are still focusing on their resumes and they're not putting forth the effort or making excuses not to do their LinkedIn. And that can hurt your job search. So, and then the mental prep that David mentioned. So I don't have time to cover all of those things. So we're going to cover 3 things that I think you need above all of those. One is the plan. You need to have your map. Even if you don't know where specifically you want to land, you want to think about the direction of it and start moving. So if you were on an episode of Survivor or something, and they told you need to head in that direction, they'd give you a compass, you'd follow north, you would go and you would do your best to navigate the terrain and get to where you're going safely. Same thing in your job search. Get your compass, have a map, have an idea of how to navigate through the terrain and get to the other side. And then you need the right mindset and attitude. People will get hired for mindset and attitude, sometimes over technical ability. So, and it shows. So sometimes I talk to people who are so depressed in their job search that they can't shake it when they get to the interview, and it will show. And then continuous improvement. So we need to talk about what this upskilling thing means. So a question here, how detailed should your plan be? You don't need to actually answer this one. So I'm asking this question. This is a question that came from the Appalachian Trail FAQ. So people are asking, how detailed should my map or my plan be to hike the Appalachian Trail? And this is the response, and I think it's absolutely perfect, because it talks about you don't need a detailed day-by-day play of how you're going to do your job search, because that can actually set you up for frustration and discouragement. So if you are like, I need to have a job by the end of April, or I need to have a job at this company, or I need just job title, you are setting yourself up for frustration and discouragement. Like I said, you need to explore, you need to figure out what you like, what you don't like. I thought when I started my career that I wanted to be a park ranger, and then I volunteered to be a park ranger and I hated it. So you also can ask other people, these are my skills, what should I do? Because even if your skills kind of match what's good for a specific job title, you might still not like it. So you have to get out there and find ways to talk to people, watch YouTube videos, attend conferences, figure out what kind of things keep grabbing your attention. What kind of articles do you keep reading? But when you have a plan for your job search, things are just kind of out of your control. You might want a job really bad with Parks and Rec, but you just keep applying and you don't get it. You don't want to have such a rigid plan that you start to get depressed because of that. You want to have a broad plan that says, okay, if I can't get into this, what's the next best thing? The other thing that it talks about is that you might think you want to get a job at National Wildlife Federation, but then you might get an opportunity for something else that's freaking amazing. Someone might approach you and say, hey, we have this, part-time thing, but we're going to be going to Africa and doing some studies. And if you are so hyper-focused on this other thing, you might miss an incredible opportunity. So you need to remain flexible. So you need a plan that allows you to keep moving forward, but allows you to take turns and do different things. And then you want to have an outline of your milestones you want to reach, again, so that you can tell your accountability buddy what you're expected to get to. And that can just help you. And that to me is more like, I want to be attending networking events. I want to have had an interview by now, because then you can at least say, well, I'm not getting interviews. So now I got to look at my resume and my LinkedIn and my approach and see what's wrong with it. So in addition to that, people think, and I think the Julie Thorne, the keynote speaker, talked about this as well in her career path. I do career interviews with people on EPR, and almost no one is in the career that they thought they would be in when they graduated. Everyone's career navigation has taken a pivot or a turn somewhere, and for the better. They all, even if it was because they were laid off, if it was because they just decided they didn't like it, or some just other opportunity came their way, everyone has kind of said, well, I kind of started thinking I was going to do this, but I ended up doing this, even if it's kind of narrow. So I know attorneys who knew they were going to be attorneys, but they're not doing the type of law that they thought they were going to do. So just keep that in mind. And then the best attitude, the best attitude is a good attitude, but what does that mean? So your attitude is just really, really tied to your expectations. So I urge you to manage your expectations by keeping a journal, tracking your progress. So one of the things that you can do is start tracking what you're applying to, and keep track of whether you think you have a good shot for it or whether you think it's a long shot. And, if you're applying for stuff that you think is really not easy, but you think that you should have a shot at, and after 10 of those, you're still not getting interviews, then you need to go back and say, okay, what's happening? What's going wrong? But if you've only applied for 10 things and you're trying to get into something like the Parks Department or the Nature Conservancy, 10 is nothing. You need to apply 50 times before you're going to get your foot in the door there. So that just helps you manage your expectations and go, okay, I know I'm shooting for something big here. It's going to take me a while. Or, I should have got this internship. Why isn't this happening? Then you can frame your mindset, things like every single person has been in your shoes before. All of us have graduated, not known what we wanted to do, figured it out, met people, explored different opportunities, done embarrassing things in the field, had moments where we're like, oh, I'll never live through this, and can't even remember what they are anymore. There's another reason why you want to network with other working environmental professionals if you can, because you can hear those stories from them and learn that, everyone's a real person. I think it's difficult for young people because environmental professionals are all educated. We've all got degrees for the most part. There's obviously other positions where you don't have to have a degree, but we're all still intelligent people who love to travel. And so when you jump into it at first, you can sometimes feel like very intimidated. But again, everyone has been in your shoes. Everyone wants to help you. So keep that as part of your mindset. And then just remember, there's no one right way to do this. I worked with people and it changes over generations too, because sustainability didn't exist as a career path for me when I was in school. So, and then previous to that, when I started my career, I was working with people who had zoology degrees because biology didn't exist in some of the schools that they went to, not in the way that it did when I went. So it's going to evolve. And by the time you're professionals and you're mentoring other people 20 years from now, you'll be working with people who have degrees that you didn't know existed at the time. So keep that in mind too. Things are going to change and you will very rapidly be the person who's giving the advice on the other end. So everything you learn, you will be able to share with other people and it will all work out in some way. It always does. That's, whether you get, like I said, people get laid off and it's the end of the world, but then they go, oh, I got an even better job. Or I got everyone who got laid off in COVID, almost all of them have said it ended up better because they got to spend time with their kids and they got into remote work and so many people are discovering that they love remote work. Of course, there are people who are still struggling, but a lot of people have ended up, getting a forced change, and you can either approach change as an opportunity or a challenge. And so if you approach these things as opportunities, you will always come out on top. So I'm going to stop for a second just to see if anybody has any concerns or asking me any questions or anything before I get too far. Okay, nope, looks good. So upskilling, that was in the title of this session, navigating difficult careers and through upskilling. So I consider upskilling is just continuous improvement. It's personal development. It means that you are always learning new things. So you want to know what your current situation is. So somebody mentioned discovering your strengths. So one thing you can do is a personal SWOT analysis, and SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A lot of times businesses do this for their evaluation, but it's not often applied to ourselves as people, but I find it really helpful. And it helps you kind of look at yourself from the outside and objectively to write down what are some areas you have for improvement and some areas where you can leverage. Like if you write down a strength, public speaking is a strength, maybe you need to leverage that and find jobs where they're looking for someone who could do public speaking. And then you can turn those results into your personal development plan. So anywhere you've written a weakness, which also could be public speaking, then you can have in your upskilling plan to learn how to, or to get opportunities to practice public speaking. On the other side of that, you should be looking at job descriptions, even for ones you don't plan to apply for. So I tell people to spend time just researching job descriptions, which means spend some time on Indeed just scanning through jobs with different titles, and you can put things in there that aren't just titles. So you can put project management environmental, project management habitat restoration, project management ecology. You can put biology science. You can put sustainable buildings. But you can also put skills. So you could put sustainable buildings, public speaking, and see if there's anything that aligns with your strengths in those jobs. And comb through those job descriptions, looking for what are their requirements, what things are optional. And then if you keep seeing over and over again in the jobs that you're interested in, that they keep saying you need GIS, well, then that's a clear indication that that should be on your continuous improvement plan. If it keeps saying that you need to have some sort of monitoring experience with a specific type of program or equipment, find a way to either watch YouTube videos, if you can volunteer, if you can take a class online, or just go to the product manufacturer and see what kind of training they might have available for that. You need to purposefully do these things. It's not enough to graduate and sit and wait to get hired. Like submitting resumes and just waiting for someone to interview you is not going to help you too much in this competitive environment. And then improve your future situation by, like I said, creating that personal development plan, which is an action plan around filling those gaps for you. So putting your weaknesses on that plan, putting the job gaps that you're finding when you start looking at applications. Again, you don't need to spend, this is kind of finding that knowledge, where your knowledge, experience, and interests intersect, by just having a non-pressure session to search job skills on Google or Indeed, and then look at areas where you think you might need to be learning something. Because people often come to me or search the site looking for, like, what certification should I get? Well, the certification you should get should really be aligned with your interest. So to do that, I really say, look at those job descriptions, look at people's jobs on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is this amazing resource where you can Google Google. You can LinkedIn search for environmental project manager. Look at those people's profile, look at their education, look at what certifications they have. And again, if you keep seeing like, oh, this person has this certification, maybe I should get one too, or look into it. You could also use that as a way to contact those people and say, hey, I'm interested in getting a job that sounds similar to yours. I would love to have a few minutes of your time to talk about it. And that's a great way to start networking too. And then upskilling can happen at every single part of your job search. So when I talked about having the job search checklist, even if the checklist is resume, if it says resume, how can I go above and beyond in my resume? Which means having it reviewed, having it professionally written. I really think everyone should write their own resume, but you could have it reviewed or have somebody, a mentor, review it. If it is using LinkedIn, how do I use LinkedIn above and beyond what everyone else is doing? How do I, in my interview, how do I stand out in my interviews? So every single aspect of your job search, you could upskill, and that will help you stand out. So that is all I had for presentation. I wanted to leave the rest for open questions, so I make sure that I answer your questions. So at this point, David said, wait, hold on, let me see. Yeah, so David mentioned informational interviews. David, I actually tell people not to do ask for informational interviews because people are kind of burnt out on it. And I think you can still ask for them, but think of it more as a meet and greet. So informational interview, when you put that spin on it, the person feels like they have to do something for you. It feels a little bit more obligatory. But if you're just asking someone to say, hey, I want to talk to you about your career, and you're not calling it an informational interview, it takes the pressure off you asking and them saying yes. So it's basically the same thing, but you're having less pressure of saying like, I want to talk to you because I want to see if you'll give me a job. And it's not really like acceptable anymore. I think for a while you could do that, but I don't think that people are really too keen on that anymore. So just don't use the informational interview words, just call it a meet and greet or something like that. And David said he used to Google search LinkedIn. Yep. LinkedIn is an amazing tool. Okay, so Jenny has a question. What are some, okay, I'm gonna stop screen sharing for a second so you don't have to stare at that weird portal. What are some commonly used skills across the industry that you recommend upskilling on? So good question, Jenny. In general, some of the main things are project management. Hi, David.
Sorry about that. I was just about to turn off the screen share myself.
Project management, GIS, writing is always a good one, like grant writing, and there's another one that I usually recommend going off of my head right now. David, can you think of any other ones? But those are the ones that I think it depends kind of like what area you want to get into, but in general, like you can never go wrong with project management because you will always, everything is a project. A birthday party for your cousin is a project, and being able to be someone who can accomplish things and get things done is extremely important. So that's a really good one. GIS and technical things. One of the reasons I advanced so quickly in my career, so I started as a $10 an hour technician doing sorting sediment samples. And then 6 months later, I was promoted. I applied for and promoted into a full-time surface water quality monitoring position. A year later, I was in a project management position, and 2 years later, I was in a middle management position. And part of the reason is because I was not a certified project manager at the time, but I still had project management skills and I had programming skills. So when other people were coming back from the field and they were reading books or playing solitaire because they didn't have anything else to do, I was writing code and updating our spreadsheets and getting us off of logbooks and into the real world, the modern world, enabling us to capture our data in faster time and have less downtime on our equipment. So be a problem solver. That's another just general skill, learn some problem solving skills for business. If you can provide that value, I promise you, you will advance farther and faster than your colleagues. David, what did I hate about being a park ranger? Good. That's a great question. So when I decided I wanted to work outdoors, I grew up in Tampa, Florida. I moved to, I had zero interest in an environmental field. So when I grew up, the buzzwords were acid rain and ozone was breaking down, and We Are the World was happening. So we had our own different sort of climate issue, but climate change was not accepted as real. Al Gore was being mocked. We camped all the time, but I didn't have this, I didn't understand the connection and what was actually happening in nature around me. So I moved to Ireland for a year, and it was cold there, and I worked with a programmer who seemed to be crazy. So I decided that I wanted to work outdoors. And so that's where I started talk about a career pivot. It was like a, so I just went to school for biology because it was close at USF, and volunteered as a park ranger. And what I didn't like was cleaning bathrooms, telling people to keep their dogs off leashes. I loved doing turtle patrol, but it didn't outweigh cleaning public restrooms for me, and making signs. And so it's well suited for lots of people. If you people love being park ranger in some circumstances, but for me, I like to create projects and very entrepreneurial, and it was not a good fit. I had never done a SWOT analysis or any strengths thing for myself. Didn't even recognize that programming was such a huge thing that I was doing at that time. Jared, I got my project management certification with the PMI.org, the Project Management Institute. I studied it for a while, and then I took a 3-weekend-long boot camp and then took the test like a week later. So just for your information, project management certification through PMI requires not only there's an education component, number of hours studied, a test, a very rigorous test, and then a certain amount of hours that you have to document that you've done it. So if you're interested in project management, start documenting project management and get experience doing getting on projects now. So if you're working on a project in school, or if you're working on something as a sidebar project, or if you get an internship and you do project work, start keeping track of that, because it's one of the things that you have to submit is the project, what tasks you did, and you have to submit a reference so that if they wanted to audit you to check, they would be able to call your supervisor and ask if you actually did those tasks. Okay. Shireen, any recommendations for online resources for learning GIS? Yeah, so Esri, the crown prince of GIS, they offer lots of training. I think they also offer some free training. It's changed a little bit over the years. You used to be able to create a free online account and make story maps. The last time I checked, I couldn't tell if you still could with a new account. So see if you can do that. Even if you can't, I think they have a low-cost student option. So while you're still a student, it might be a good time to look into that. If any of you are interested, get on my radar and connect with me on LinkedIn, because I'm trying to start a GIS intern bootcamp and intern program. I started a GIS internship program at the EPC when I worked there, and we rotated students through the internship, two students every semester, and it was awesome. They just kept building on what the others built, and we're making some really good projects, so I want to kind of see that happen again. You can also, I know Esri has a couple of MOOCs, MOOC, which is, I forget what it stands for, but it's like mega open source something courses, and MOOC, and they have a couple of them that they do, and they're free open source courses, and they're really awesome. And then if you go to, I'll type these in the chat, is Udemy is one, and Coursera. They offer low cost. Udemy is more like low cost courses that are there, and then Coursera is more like university type programming, but I think you can audit a lot of them for free if you don't get the certification. So those are also some options. Megan's question, do you think a master's degree is a must-have for most decent paying positions, not unpaid internships? So no, actually, I think it's personal choice, and it's because everyone's career path is different. I think if you like school, by all means, get a master's degree. If you struggle to get through school the first time, it's perfectly valid to start exploring and work some to kind of see where you go and what your interests are. Again, if you already if you got that in your undergrad and you're like, I want to continue learning about ecology and you want to move forward, that's perfectly fine. But if you feel like, I mean, I tell people to go with your gut on this. If going back to school just feels like, ugh, and you're not interested, it's going to be really hard and costly. So there are certain jobs where it does pay off, like especially if you do want to get into academia and teaching. Government, maybe, because they have certain requirements that you have to have. But in the private field and other areas, a lot of it is how hard you work, how good your work is. You know, in the nonprofit world, you could go far without having a master's degree. So that goes back to searching those jobs, like spend time searching job descriptions and see what they tell you. So if you keep looking and they keep telling you need a master's degree, you might need to get a master's degree. For myself, I only had the bachelor's degree, and I was able to get to, I mean, I could have made it to senior director if I didn't work for the people I worked for. And so that wasn't a hindrance for me. It was showing up, doing the work, going above and beyond. It's hard either way, is what I tell people. It's hard to go back to school. It's hard to get ahead on the job without it. So you kind of just pick your path. And if school doesn't feel like something you want to do, or just if you have time and the ability to get work and kind of explore and see what you like first, I really recommend that, because you might end up in the same situation I was in with the park ranger thing and think you're going back to your master's to do X, Y, or Z, and then go, ugh, I don't actually like this work. But if you've done some work first, then you could help kind of figure that out. Cece, thanks for sharing the Esri training. David, thanks for submitting another question. Are there particular jobs or paths that you expect to be high demand that you would recommend students explore? So this is another one where I feel like chasing the job might not, or chasing where jobs are available might not fulfill you. So I think a lot of like sustainability is just blowing up. So but at the same time, lots of people are graduating looking for sustainability jobs. So it's still competitive. It also depends on where you live. So if you live in New Hampshire and you don't plan on moving out of New Hampshire, even a sustainability job there might still have high competition. So, and then the job market is very different in California because there's lots of regulations and regulatory jobs, but not so much in Florida. It's more ecology based and bugs and bunny. There's still permitting going on, obviously, but the climates are a little different. So I think what I would recommend more is having a plan A and plan B. Like the jobs that are hard to get are ones that are very specific. So if you are looking for a conservation job with whales, that's going to be hard to get. So, but I don't want to tell you to go after sustainability jobs because there's lots of them if your passion lies with whales. So there's always a way. It goes back to those expectations. Like if you know that the job you're going for, like you're just determined you're going to work with the World Wildlife Foundation or NWF or the Nature Conservancy, if like those are hard, you just have to know that expectation. But you might want to have that plan B we talked about, where I can search for these jobs really hard for 6 months, but when I hit that point, maybe I need to go looking at something that's easier. You also have the case of like Florida, where there's you all probably aren't aware, but I am because I'm from Florida and all of my friends are posting, because this would have directly affected my job before. There's a gypsum stack, and gypsum is a byproduct of fertilizer that is right on the coast, and one of the berms, so it's just like a pool of water. One of the berms around it has failed, and now there's all this phosphate and like horrible nutrients going into the bay again. This happened before, and that was job security for about 20 of us for a good 30 years. So there will be jobs opening in Florida for that reason as well now. They will be having more studies hiring more environmental scientists to come in and do the work. So I don't know if I really answered that question, David. I try not to tell people, like I said, to chase certain types of jobs. Just I think it's more about networking and getting opportunities through your network and people that you know. And even if you have something that you're really interested in that is not a high demand job, I try not to steer people away from their passions. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. Any more questions? You can ask me about my career path, things you're thinking about getting into, where to get certifications. Actually, I interviewed David for the Career Coach a year, I don't know, it's been more than a year now, and I think on certifications, and that is one of the most popular videos that I have, David. I don't know if you knew that. Okay, you can keep putting in your questions. I'm just gonna give you more. Where can you find the recorded session? That's a question for David. I'm gonna give you my contact information, so if you think of something later, you'll know where to find me. As I said, these are the books that I just published, and the one is to help you with creating your job action plan, and the other one is a journal to help you stay motivated. It has challenges and weekly motivational topics. And then soon I'm creating a mapper to help people find places to network. So there will be a map on the website soon. Also have this Career Explorer coming. So I'm looking forward to have those come out, plus the GIS internship, which is working on projects like those. And then, so here's all the different places that you can find me and things that I'm working on. So I'm on a lot of social platforms. And like I said, any questions that you have that you think of later, feel free to reach out. There are tons of free resources on my website. So there's that whole SWOT analysis and how to create your personal development plan. There's a free download. There's a job search checklist that we talked about a couple of times. Okay, another question from Miranda. Do you have a suggestion for how to split time between getting certifications, searching, and applying? Yeah, so what I find the most helpful for me in time management is to create time buckets. So I know, like, I'm an entrepreneur now, so I have got multiple businesses I'm running and lots of volunteer things that I do. So Mondays are my marketing days. So I have meetings with my team and I do marketing on Mondays. Fridays are my budgeting days. So anything that I need to do that has to do with budgeting, I do on Fridays. So you might want to just say it's going to take me, I'm going to reserve 30 minutes or an hour once a week to job searching and do all of it in that time block. Because if you're trying to do 10 minutes a day, that's every task you jump into has startup time and finish time. And then you have a buffer between the next thing you work on and your brain switching gears. So if you can do more focused time in an hour, it's kind of like exercising. If you did an hour of riding your bike hard on one day a week, it's better than doing 10 minutes every week. It kind of comes out the same, but you don't have to change clothes every time. You don't have to get in a different mindset. So if you can just do some time buckets. So certification is going to take you an hour a week. Just block that hour on your calendar and say, this is when I'm doing certifications. And then another hour on a different day of the week, I'm going to do my job searching and search those job descriptions and figure out what I'm going to do next. So I hope that makes sense. You're welcome, Kim. All right, a few minutes left. After this, there is the, David, do you want to put any notes in there about the lounge and the open sessions? You can also attend that. And, or I don't know if you want to come on here and talk about it. Any other questions about setting up your LinkedIn or how to connect to people on LinkedIn? resumes and what should or shouldn't be on your resume. Preparing for interviews. What else did we talk about? Okay, yeah, so David says there's a short closing message on the main stage, and then the lounges will continue after that for discussions. David, do you have any more questions for me? Here's a question from Stephen. Thank you. Do you know or have any resources for tailoring a resume for government jobs? That's a great question. And I just published a blog last week about this exact topic. We interviewed, one of my interns interviewed Nancy Segal. She has a history of working with the USAjobs.gov and doing federal resumes. So we interviewed her about do's and don'ts. So it's a really great question because a regular resume is I recommend one page because essentially if you can't sell them on one page, you won't sell them on two. So, but your resume highlights only your top relevant stuff. But a resume for the federal government through USAjobs.gov they use a different system where you apply for a job, but they'll also scan your resume for, oh, thank you. They will scan your resume for other positions you might qualify for. So it's more like a CV for them. They're going to ask you for anything and everything that you can put on it. So that resume is more like 5 or 6 pages. And it'll include all the stuff that you wouldn't have normally put on your resume, like awards and projects you worked on in school, publications, things like that. So it's a little bit more CV-like in that nature. And then they're also looking for you to follow the rules. So it's very governmenty. They want you to be very specific about things. If they say, you know, this is a requirement, this is a requirement. Whereas if you're submitting a resume for a private company or a smaller company, nonprofit, sometimes you can swap out, you know, some experience for different experience and be a little bit more lenient there. But the federal ones are pretty strict. But David shared the link to that in the chat. So great question. Which is also a good point. There are also blogs on the website, and there's topics like how to write your cover letter, lots of things on networking, and a webinar series, which was actually that was David did the one on certification. So that's a good one too if you have questions about certifications. All right, we have time for another question if you have one. Otherwise, I thank you all for being here, and I hope this was helpful to you. Oh, hey, Piper. Thanks for sharing the link. That's question. Are there any organizations you would recommend volunteering to gain experience or network? Again, it kind of depends on what your interest is and where you live. So, and what opportunities are available. So you can Google search environmental organizations, but I find it hard to find what's actually available to you. That's why I'm creating a map and trying to pull this stuff together in one place. But you know, things that are universal across the country are Sierra Club, Audubon, Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a great place to get public speaking experience. But look for your local there's usually friends of the local river, friends of the watershed. Look for, just kind of Google your local nonprofits. And so sometimes you can Google volunteer opportunities. There's some volunteer portals, but and also just start networking in the area that you're in. So the National Association of Environmental Professionals has chapters across the country. It's a great question to ask people that you're networking with. When I moved to Syracuse, I asked everyone, hey, I just moved here. Can you tell me where I should network? So get on LinkedIn and talk to people and ask them, hey, I'm just about to graduate. Where should I network? and they'll be able to help you. You're welcome, Miranda. Thank you. Okay, we are just about over on our time. There's only 2 minutes left. So if anybody wants to reach me, it's www.theenvironmentalcareercoach.com, and you can contact me through there or just connect with me on LinkedIn. You know, that is another takeaway for you all, is during this conference, you should be watching who's posting things here, like David and Piper, any presenters that you found were particularly interesting, and connect with them on LinkedIn. Start building your network and your second connections there. Don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, I liked what you said, just wanted to be connected, and you know, ease yourself into networking that way.